The world has seen numerous significant events unfold recently, shifting geopolitical landscapes and impacting economies globally. Amidst this turbulence, a critical issue is intensifying within the United States: the increasingly harsh environment faced by undocumented immigrants in certain states. They say America is the land of opportunity. But what if that opportunity vanishes the moment you cross a state line? It's a stark reality we need to examine closely. Stay with us as we delve into this complex situation, and we'll provide key conclusions at the end of this video. Imagine this scenario. You're driving, perhaps minding your own business, when flashing lights appear in your rearview mirror. You get pulled over for a minor issue, like a non-functioning taillight. Suddenly, the situation escalates. Instead of a simple warning or ticket, you find yourself ensnared in the immigration system, potentially facing deportation. Does this sound extreme? Perhaps. But it's the lived reality for many individuals right now in specific parts of the U.S. This isn't hypothetical. It's happening. The place you choose to live, or even just pass through, could determine the difference between relative safety and constant surveillance, between continuing your life and facing removal from the country. Why are some states intensifying their crackdowns on undocumented populations, while others seem to maintain a more neutral stance? What fuels this divergence in policy and enforcement? We're witnessing new laws emerge that function more like ominous warnings than standard regulations. Prepare yourself, because if you lack documentation, the 10 states we are about to discuss might just represent the most perilous places to reside in America today. We will analyze the specific measures these states are taking and their profound impact on immigrant communities. Make sure to watch until the very end, as we will summarize the key takeaways and offer concluding thoughts on this critical issue. Also, consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the like button. It truly helps us grow and continue bringing you important analysis like this. We'd also love to hear from you. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Number 10. Texas. Do you feel secure simply because you've resided here for years, built a life, contributed to the community? Think again. In the Lone Star State, even a routine activity like going to the supermarket could result in detention if you don't possess the specific documents authorities demand. The ground has shifted significantly. We are talking about Texas, where the crackdown on immigration has accelerated dramatically. In 2023, the state legislature passed Senate Bill 4, a controversial measure granting state law enforcement officers the authority to arrest and deport undocumented immigrants. This power isn't wielded by federal ICE agents, but by local police officers, individuals patrolling neighborhoods and responding to everyday calls. The implications are far-reaching. If that wasn't enough cause for concern, the law also stipulates severe penalties. Re-entering Texas after being deported could lead to imprisonment for up to 20 years. This sounds incredibly harsh, doesn't it? But here's a crucial distinction. This isn't a federal mandate. It is the state government taking immigration enforcement into its own hands, creating a separate and arguably more severe system parallel to federal law. While legal challenges against SB4 are underway, with lawsuits flying and constitutional questions being raised, the climate of fear is already palpable. The uncertainty hangs heavy in the air. Could your next encounter with law enforcement, even for a minor traffic infraction, transform into a one-way journey out of the United States? For undocumented individuals living in Texas, the answer is increasingly, terrifyingly, yes. The consequences are not just potential, they are immediate and absolutely brutal, tearing apart families and destabilizing communities. Please remember to watch this video through to the end, where we will offer our conclusions on these developments. Number 9. Oklahoma. Just when you thought the situation couldn't become more precarious, consider the developments in Oklahoma. Located just one state north of Texas, Oklahoma is establishing its own set of stringent measures, creating a trap that is already proving effective. In 2024, lawmakers in Oklahoma approved legislation that criminalizes being in the state without legal authorization, classifying it as a state crime. This move mirrors actions taken in neighboring Texas, but adds its own unique and severe twists. Under this new law, an undocumented individual could face up to 2 years behind bars simply for their presence in the state. But the punishment doesn't end upon release. After serving their time, individuals are given a mere 72 hours to leave Oklahoma. Failure to comply within this incredibly short time frame risks immediate rearrest and further prosecution. This isn't just a harsh penalty. It feels calculated, designed to make continued residence virtually impossible. And what triggers an investigation into someone's status? What if you're pulled over for something as minor as a malfunctioning headlight? That could be sufficient grounds. You would be shocked at how rapidly a routine roadside stop can escalate into detention and potential time in a jail cell under these new provisions. The law explicitly mandates that local police officers must enforce these state immigration statutes. This effectively deputizes everyday officers, turning them into de facto immigration agents alongside their regular duties. Does this sound extreme? It absolutely is. And if you believe these laws are mere posturing, think again. The state has already commenced enforcement, making dozens of arrests shortly after the law took effect. It is clear that Oklahoma is not just talking tough, it's actively implementing these measures, and the crackdown is only just beginning. Number 8. Iowa. The trend of states enacting their own stringent immigration laws continues, and Iowa is a prime example. Don't let the calm facade of small towns and quiet roads fool you. Beneath the surface, this Midwestern state is quietly transforming into one of the most challenging environments for undocumented immigrants. Inspired directly by Texas's controversial Senate Bill 4, Iowa passed its own similar bill in early 2024. This legislation effectively makes it illegal under state law to be undocumented within Iowa's borders, creating a new layer of legal jeopardy beyond federal immigration regulations. The speed at which this law came together was startling. Signed, sealed, and ready for enforcement almost immediately. You'd be shocked how quickly the legislative process moved. And here is the core issue. Even if you are not committing any other crime, simply being undocumented is now enough to potentially land you behind bars under Iowa state law. The legislation empowers local law enforcement officers to question and detain anyone they suspect might not be legally present in the state. Does that sound vague? That ambiguity is precisely the point. A minor traffic stop, a routine ID check requested for any number of reasons, or even just walking through a neighborhood deemed suspicious by an officer, could spiral rapidly into a full-blown legal nightmare. But it gets worse. If an individual is caught and deported under the state law, re-entering Iowa could now lead to serious felony charges. We are talking about substantial prison sentences. Years, not just months. This is not merely a scare tactic. Authorities in Iowa have already begun enforcing this law. Reports indicate multiple arrests and deportations occurred just weeks after the bill went into effect, demonstrating the state's commitment to its implementation. Families are being torn apart rapidly. Children are left behind when parents are detained. Homes are abandoned seemingly overnight, and entire communities are now living under a cloud of constant fear. Iowa isn't just following in Texas's footsteps. Arguably, it's going even further, often with less media scrutiny and organized resistance. This lack of attention makes the situation even more perilous. The scariest laws are often the quiet ones, those that people don't fully notice or understand until it's too late. And in Iowa, that silence is becoming increasingly deadly for the undocumented population. Number 7. Florida. Sunshine, beautiful beaches, and unfortunately some of the most severe immigration laws in the United States. Welcome to Florida, where the idyllic paradise quickly fades for those who are undocumented. This state ramped up its immigration enforcement significantly, enacting measures that create immense hardship. New legislation, notably Senate Bill 1718 signed into law by Governor Ron DeSantis in 2023, punishes undocumented immigrants even more severely, particularly if they are caught committing other crimes, even non-violent ones. Consider this unsettling detail. Driving without a valid license in Florida can now result in longer jail sentences, specifically because of an individual's immigration status. The law intertwines minor state offenses with federal immigration status in a way that dramatically increases the stakes. But the reach of these laws extends beyond interactions with police. Hospitals in Florida are now required to inquire about a patient's immigration status upon admission. Yes, you heard that correctly. Seeking essential medical help could itself become a risk, potentially triggering a report to authorities. Imagine needing emergency care but hesitating due to the fear that your status might be investigated. This creates a chilling effect on accessing health care for vulnerable populations. And what about families? Schools have started implementing policies that could lead to reporting undocumented guardians during the enrollment process. The fear is pervasive and real, creeping into every facet of daily life, from finding work to attending school and even seeking health care. The consequences are tangible. Communities are shrinking as families flee to neighboring states, seeking refuge from the increasingly hostile environment. Some are even contemplating leaving the U.S. altogether. It's shocking how rapidly the climate has changed. Just 5 years ago, many areas in Florida were considered relative safe havens. Today, they feel more like trap zones. Florida boasts one of the highest deportation rates in the country, with thousands of families separated in just the last year alone. ICE raids have become more frequent, more aggressive, and increasingly public. Lawmakers are already pushing for even stricter measures, including mandatory immigration checks at public job sites and increased funding for local law enforcement cooperation with ICE. So, ask yourself, what happens when your doctor, your child's teacher, or even your boss becomes a potential threat? What happens when simply living a normal life becomes impossible? In Florida, this isn't a hypothetical question. It's the unfolding reality, and the clock is ticking for many. Number 6. Georgia. What if the simple fact of your existence became the crime itself? What if just living in the wrong zip code without the right documents meant risking jail time? This chilling scenario reflects the reality taking shape in Georgia, a state intensifying its already tough stance on immigration. In 2024, Georgia enacted new laws, following the trend seen in states like Texas and Iowa, empowering local police to detain and turn over anyone suspected of being in the U.S. illegally, often without needing a warrant. It's not just about federal agencies like ICE anymore. The law actively encourages counties to enforce federal immigration codes as if they were local ordinances. This effectively transforms small-town sheriffs and local police officers into extensions of federal border enforcement. You would be shocked at how quickly someone's life can unravel in this environment. Even a minor infraction, such as not possessing a driver's license, can initiate a process that culminates in deportation. Georgia already has a significant history regarding immigration enforcement. The state is home to the Stewart Detention Center, one of the largest immigrant detention facilities in the U.S. Critics frequently refer to it as a black hole, highlighting the difficulties individuals face in navigating the system and securing release once detained. The conditions and lack of transparency associated with such large facilities add another layer of fear. For those residing in rural parts of Georgia, the fear is often magnified. Away from the potential resources and support networks of larger cities, individuals feel more isolated and vulnerable. There are fewer legal safety nets and community protections. It's often just silence and a struggle for survival. Even children are not exempt from the impact of these policies. Undocumented parents express deep anxiety about sending their children to school, fearing that enrollment processes or school interactions could lead to their status being reported due to increased state-level data sharing initiatives. One incorrectly filed document, one school administrator asking too many questions under perceived pressure, and boom, families can be irrevocably split. What kind of state treats hardworking families like fugitives? What kind of place turns everyday errands, school drop-offs, and job clock-ins into potential immigration checkpoints? In Georgia, the answer is becoming increasingly clear and is right outside the front door for many. Number 5. Alabama. If you want to discuss states going all in on immigration enforcement, you absolutely need to hear about what's happening in Alabama. This state has a reputation for aggressive measures, and recent developments suggest it's doubling down. Long before some of the more recent state-level crackdowns made headlines, Alabama already had its infamous House Bill 56, once widely dubbed the toughest immigration law in the nation. Parts of it were eventually struck down by federal courts years ago due to constitutional challenges. However, the spirit of that law seems to be experiencing a quiet resurgence. Lawmakers have been working diligently behind the scenes to bring back similar measures, often repackaged in legally refined versions designed to withstand court scrutiny. One recent bill, for instance, mandates that employers use the E-Verify system to confirm the immigration status of their workers. Crucially, this requirement isn't just for new hires. It also applies during random audits of existing employees. This means that even if you've held your job for years without issue, you remain at constant risk of being reported and subsequently fired if your status is flagged during an audit. But the pressure doesn't stop at the workplace. The state now actively encourages landlords to report tenants they suspect might be undocumented. Your home, the place where you should feel safest, is no longer a guaranteed sanctuary. An anonymous tip from a neighbor or a landlord acting on suspicion could lead to an investigation and potentially deportation proceedings before you even finish your morning coffee. You'd be shocked how many people have already chosen to leave Alabama voluntarily, unwilling to live under such constant threat. We're seeing families packing up overnight, children being pulled from schools mid-term, and entire immigrant communities seemingly vanishing due to fear. And guess what? Some politicians in Alabama openly state that this is precisely their goal. They have made it abundantly clear through their policies and rhetoric. Alabama is not interested in welcoming immigrants. It is focused on driving them out. The system is increasingly designed to make life untenable, forcing individuals to choose between living constantly in the shadows or leaving the state entirely. Either way, for the undocumented immigrant in Alabama, it feels like a losing proposition. Number 4. Arizona. Ever felt like the law is watching your every move, scrutinizing you the moment you step outside your home? In Arizona, for many, that feeling is a daily reality. The law here doesn't just stare, it actively follows, questions, and sometimes detains. This intense scrutiny isn't a new phenomenon in the Grand Canyon state. For years, Arizona has been ground zero for some of the most contentious immigration legislation in American history. And guess what? In 2025, it appears to be back on the front lines of this battle. You have likely heard of Senate Bill 1070, the infamous Show Me Your Papers law that sparked national outrage back in 2010. This law permitted police to stop anyone they reasonably suspected of being undocumented and demand proof of legal status. While parts of SB 1070 were challenged and modified by the courts, key provisions remain in effect today. Critics labeled it institutionalized racial profiling, while supporters claimed it was a necessary measure for law enforcement. Here's the current situation. Under new state leadership, enforcement of existing immigration-related laws has ramped up once again. Powers granted to county sheriffs, especially in border-adjacent areas like Maricopa County, have been reinforced. These departments now collaborate extensively with federal immigration agencies like ICE, leading to record-breaking numbers of deportations originating from Arizona arrests this year alone. One local sheriff even publicly boasted about his department's increased effectiveness in identifying and removing undocumented individuals, many apprehended for minor violations like traffic stops or having expired vehicle tags. You'd be shocked at how quickly a simple routine stop can escalate into a life-altering immigration nightmare. Adding another layer of concern is Arizona's new Community Watch Incentive Program. This initiative offers tax credits to private citizens who report individuals they suspect are undocumented to the authorities. Does this sound like something from a dystopian movie? Perhaps, but it's the current reality in Arizona. Think about the environment this creates. It's already hostile, with scorching heat and unforgiving desert landscapes. Now add laws that make people afraid to even walk outside, and neighbors incentivized to report each other. It's not just hostile, it feels dangerous. Who is really surviving in this climate? Number 3. South Carolina. Sunshine, picturesque beaches, historic charm. That's the image South Carolina often projects, perhaps accurately depicted on tourist postcards. However, for undocumented immigrants residing in the state, the reality feels increasingly like an approaching storm, far from serene. This year, South Carolina lawmakers passed one of the most aggressive anti-immigration bills witnessed recently across the nation. This legislation doesn't solely target undocumented individuals themselves. It broadens its scope to penalize anyone who knowingly assists them. This includes landlords renting property, employers providing jobs, and even family members offering shelter or transportation. You heard that correctly. If caught housing or transporting someone lacking legal documentation, you could face significant jail time or steep financial penalties under this new state law. The state isn't just passing laws, it's actively ensuring they are enforced. Local police officers are undergoing cross-training with federal immigration agents, blurring the lines between state and federal jurisdictions. Furthermore, a newly launched task force has been established with a specific focus on domestic alien enforcement. This is essentially a formal way of describing coordinated door-to-door checks and targeted operations within immigrant-heavy neighborhoods. And guess what? They're enforcing it rigorously. Police now have enhanced authority, and cooperation with ICE is stronger than ever. So, consider this. What happens when the places you rely on, your workplace, your home, even potentially your church or community center, become points of vulnerability? What happens when the people you interact with daily, landlords, bosses, maybe even acquaintances, are implicitly or explicitly encouraged to report you? In South Carolina, the web of surveillance and potential enforcement is tightening, making everyday life precarious for the undocumented. One wrong move, one interaction interpreted with suspicion, and an entire life built over years could disappear overnight. Number 2. Tennessee. You might not immediately associate Tennessee, a state renowned for its vibrant country music scene and the scenic beauty of the Smoky Mountains, with harsh immigration policies. However, beneath its welcoming surface, Tennessee is quietly solidifying its position as one of the most perilous states in the U.S. for undocumented immigrants. It began subtly, with whispers of local counties forging closer partnerships with ICE, increasing information sharing and operational coordination. But in 2025, these quiet collaborations escalated into loud, statewide action. The Tennessee legislature passed a significant bill that now mandates state employees, ranging from teachers in public schools to clerks at the Department of Motor Vehicles, to report individuals they suspect of being undocumented to law enforcement authorities. That is correct. The person issuing your driver's license renewal, or the administrator checking your child into school, might now be legally obligated to flag you if they harbor suspicions about your status, potentially initiating an investigation that could lead to deportation. How quickly can your information travel once it's in their hands? You would be shocked. This creates an environment where accessing basic services becomes fraught with risk. Furthermore, even more disturbingly, Tennessee is among the few states that explicitly permits traffic checkpoints established solely based on immigration suspicion. These aren't border checkpoints. Some are being set up in quiet, residential suburban neighborhoods, far removed from any international boundary. And guess what? Officers at these checkpoints often don't need another reason, like a traffic violation, to stop and question drivers about their status. If you are undocumented and happen to be working under the radar, perhaps in construction or service industries, Tennessee presents additional challenges. The state has expanded E-Verify mandates to include even smaller businesses, making it harder to find employment without scrutiny. A single red flag during the hiring process or a subsequent audit, and it isn't just your job that vanishes, it's potentially your entire future in the state. Local jails have also effectively become ICE processing centers. Even a minor misdemeanor offense can lead to an immigration hold, detention, and eventual handover to federal authorities. In fact, data from last year indicates that over 60% of all immigration arrests in Tennessee stemmed directly from traffic-related offenses. Let that statistic sink in. People are facing deportation potentially triggered by speeding tickets or broken taillights. Even community organizations and churches that once served as safe havens are reportedly feeling the pressure, possibly being monitored under the guise of public safety concerns, discouraged from assisting undocumented individuals. Number 1. Louisiana. Think the Deep South is solely about lively jazz, flavorful jambalaya, and Mardi Gras celebrations? Think again. In Louisiana, the cultural rhythm has shifted ominously, and undocumented immigrants are increasingly finding themselves caught in the crossfire of stringent enforcement policies. What happens when a state already notorious for having one of the highest incarceration rates per capita in the entire country decides to leverage its extensive prison system to target immigrants as well? Buckle up, because Louisiana is showing exactly that. For starters, the state passed a new law this year that grants local law enforcement broad authority to check the immigration status of individuals during any stop, even if there is no initial suspicion related to their immigration status. Walking home from work could potentially lead to detention in a holding cell if you cannot produce satisfactory documentation on the spot. Local jails across Louisiana are reportedly flooded with immigration holds, turning parish facilities into de facto ICE staging grounds. ICE agents apparently have significant access to arrest and detain individuals directly from these local jails, often following arrests for minor infractions or even based on suspicion alone, sometimes without explicit warrants. A single missed court date for a minor offense, one traffic violation, or even a noise complaint reported by a neighbor could be enough to trigger the process, landing an individual in the complex and often unforgiving immigration detention system. And guess what? That's not even the most alarming part. Some critics argue that Louisiana is reviving aspects of controversial past practices, potentially pressuring private detention facilities, some with documented histories of abuse and poor conditions, to handle the overflow of detained immigrants. These aren't just standard prisons. They can feel like inescapable traps. While the bayous might appear peaceful on the surface, the policies creeping across Louisiana are anything but benign for the undocumented population. It increasingly feels less about traditional law and order and more about instilling fear and asserting control. In Louisiana, it seems, freedom is a privilege reserved only for the documented. Conclusions. As we've explored across these 10 states, from Texas's SB4 to Oklahoma's 72-hour rule, Iowa's quiet crackdown, Florida's multi-pronged approach, Georgia's deputizing of local police, Alabama's revived harshness, Arizona's show me your papers legacy, South Carolina's targeting of helpers, Tennessee's mandatory reporting, and Louisiana's leveraging of its prison system, a clear and concerning pattern emerges. A growing number of U.S. states are enacting increasingly stringent immigration laws, often operating independently of, and sometimes exceeding, federal mandates. This patchwork of state-level legislation is creating a climate of intense fear and uncertainty for undocumented immigrants and their families. Routine activities, driving, working, going to school, seeking medical care, even residing in one's own home, are becoming fraught with the risk of detention and deportation. Minor infractions can escalate into life-altering consequences, tearing families apart and destabilizing communities. Local law enforcement is increasingly being drawn into the role of immigration enforcement, sometimes mandated, sometimes incentivized, blurring jurisdictional lines and potentially eroding community trust. Furthermore, the expansion of E-Verify, pressure on hospitals and schools to report status, and even incentives for private citizens to inform on neighbors contribute to an environment where surveillance feels omnipresent. While proponents argue these measures are necessary for law and order or border security, the human cost is undeniable and raises significant constitutional and ethical questions. The very definition of opportunity in America seems to be geographically conditional and increasingly dependent on documentation status. The situation underscores a deep divide in how different states approach immigration, creating a complex and often perilous legal landscape for some of the nation's most vulnerable residents. Thank you for joining us on our channel for this important discussion. If you found this analysis insightful, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more content examining critical political and economic issues. Your support is vital for our channel's growth and allows us to continue producing in-depth reports. We value your perspective. Please share your thoughts and let us know where you're watching from in the comments below.